some opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Welcome back, everybody. We are here doing Anatomy of a Movie, RoboCop 2004.
14
edition. Obviously, I'm a few years off.
It was supposed to come out about
around that time. Because, this movie was supposed to come out a long time ago. The reboot. Yes, we are doing the reboot of RoboCop. I am your host, Marisa Serafini, and today I have...
Hi, guys. I'm Sara Stretton.
Hello, it's Demetri Panos.
Yes, we're doing the reboot, the José Padilla's version. What did you guys think as a reboot? Was it necessary to do a remake or so extension, really? I felt this movie was more of an extension of the original movie.
Well, I probably have a little bit of a different perspective than you two. I know you guys have covered the original RoboCop, so you all can check that out if you haven't seen it. I actually haven't seen the original in years and don't remember too much of it. It's like I actually don't know if I ever saw the full thing, unfortunately. Sorry, fans out there. So I very much approached the RoboCop reboot.
You should have watched our podcast.
I wanted to see this one, so I didn't come with any outside judgments first. And so I did. I walked into this movie really just for it on its own, not as a extended edition, not as a different version, and I got to approach it. That being said, I thought it was fun. I thought that I really liked a lot of the effects. I liked his suit. There was a lot of things I liked. That being said, to me it wasn't like a heart-wrenching or big drama or anything too crazy, but it's a fun action movie. That I would like a little bit of tweaks here and there, but there was a lot of things I was really happy with.
Okay, Demetri?
Well, this is a perfect companion piece to what we had done with the original RoboCop, which we got some really good reviews on.
Yes, we did.
Yay, Anatomy of a Movie team. That's fantastic. If you've been watching, listening, my stance on remakes are we just going to get this out of the way, and just so that it's noted, and we can always point to this episode. You shouldn't remake classic movies. Only a handful of recent remakes that have come out I've actually enjoyed and have had fun with. And I will say off the top, this was one of them, and you'll be surprised for my reasonings on this, but My Bloody Valentine remake was done very well. You took a B movie that maybe 15 people saw, so they weren't familiar with the story, and they made a great 3D remake of it. And I was at Lionsgate at the time, and I even remember writing an email to the person in charge of production who put that through, telling them this is for horror fans. It was very well done. Friday the 13th reboot, I thought was done very well and smart. Yeah, and it was fun. It was a fun horror movie. Carrie of recent times, I thought
You're naming a lot
was decent.
Of horror thrillers.
Well, because they don't necessarily remake comedies. I mean, when you look at what they go back and look at for remakes, I can't recall the last time. I can't recall a comedy that was remade.
The Wizard of Oz is not a comedy or drama.
But I don't think that it was remade other than rebooted. When you're looking back at remakes, a lot of the stuff that they do, that they go back to the genre because it may have been popular for some reason, and they think that they can get a younger crowd, rebrand it, re-rate it, redo it.
Yeah, make it interesting again.
And try to make it interesting again. But again, when you're working with, the Halloween Rob Zombie movie that made me very angry. It was awful. And Halloween 2 was even worse. So, some of, like I said, Carrie was watchable. I thought it was pretty decent. Now you come to RoboCop. This is the second Paul Verhoeven movie that I believe Sony has released that was a remake. The first one was Total Recall. And I'm going to admit, the marketing on Total Recall got me into the theater. I said, okay, I'm in. The Schwarzenegger movie with Sharon Stone, it was really good. It's a solid science fiction movie. Good movie. I don't see that you need to remake it, but okay, they're doing it PG-13. Walked out of that movie very angry. That movie was just awful. So as soon as they say they're doing RoboCop, another Paul Verhoeven movie, science fiction movie, a lot of violence and all, I'm like, why go back to a classic? This movie has a following. It's been franchised. And you pointed out how I called it RoboFlop. So, I'm going to say that going into it, the marketing didn't really do anything for me. The reviews actually, though, came out. And on Rotten Tomatoes, it was around 50%, which is pretty much right down the middle. And that means to me the people who are genre watchers, who like genre, said, hey, you know what? You might want to give this a chance. So that sort of kind of had me going around the corner. And then after we talked about the 1987 RoboCop, I'm like, okay, I want to check this out. And when I did, I was like, okay, if you're going to remake a classic, this is what you try to do. You don't remake it. You just redo it. And just make it a different story. Make it a different, just change everything around. I mean, only 3 characters' names come over into this one.
Yeah.
OmniCorp is there. Yeah, Murphy.
We didn't have Lewis in this movie.
We did have Lewis.
Yeah, there was Lewis.
His first
Yeah, he was
name
male.
Al
It was
Lewis.
a
Yeah.
male version.
It was a male version. And then who's the other person who carried over? There was another character sort of kind of who carries over as well. But
We had OmniCorp too.
yeah, in OmniCorp, which is played a little differently. But other than that, they're introducing us to a completely different environment, a completely new world, so to speak. I don't think that this did not have the satiric clause that the original RoboCop had. That was a difference for me. Did I miss it? Yes and no. For this world, what the themes that they did, they changed.
The themes definitely changed.
Thematically, this movie changed.
This version, there was less comedy in it. It was more of a family-driven movie and more based on humanity because they actually showed the mother, or the wife and the son in this movie, and in the original they didn't really show until flashbacks.
Right.
So I liked how they had a family in this version to ground that humanity within Murphy. So, and that was another theme that carried throughout the whole film. And then really they dropped the whole religious undertone aspect that the first one was loaded with.
Yeah. No, I mean, they just took a different tact altogether. They didn't
And I agree
just
with you, and I think
cookie-cutter.
that's a good idea. I think that if you especially really love the first movie, it can never really be remade. You need to take that different take. You need to take a different stance. And what they did is they took the world or the overall image and then just totally did a different story within it. And I think that was a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do it, obviously this is an executive decision, and I just stop. I mean, what next? I mean, Psycho sucked. Don't do Jaws, don't do Godfather. Just stop with the remakes. I mean, we already get, the business gets slimmed enough for not being original. I get what you're trying to do with RoboCop, and I pleasantly liked it. I found myself going, okay, I get it. It's different. The diehards, all you haters out there, our show is going to try to approach this much differently. We're not going to hate for the sake of hating. I almost did that. I almost did that myself. I almost went in hating for the sake of this can't be good.
You wanted to not like it.
Yeah, and Total Recall was such a bad movie that I'm like, this can't be good. Yeah, the remake was so bad. This can't be good, can it? And I walked out surprisingly different themes. I appreciated what they were going for. It was just a different movie. And it's funny that you talk about the family because you remember when we talked about the original RoboCop, the original RoboCop's done sort of kind of backwards. And remember I said if this were an American film, you would meet him with his family first. You would get to know him that way, and then he would be offed. And the original RoboCop didn't do that. Hence the very violent religious symbolism death that he had. Yeah. Where this one, we do see his family more. And I was like, okay, I appreciate it. In fact, so much so, I thought that there were elements in this RoboCop that should have been in the original sequel, RoboCop 2. I thought that's what that movie was going to explore. Alex Murphy trying to find his family and finding his, now that he's gained his humanity back, he's got to try to find a place in this world. And that's what this RoboCop is more about.
Yeah.
More so than finding one's humanity again and identity.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing about that is this whole movie, Murphy constantly knows who he is. He never lost any memories of that, because when they first restart this program and it's automatically 3 months later, the first thing we see is his memory. Yeah. Because in the original, it takes a while for them to, he finally has a dream. But this one, they start off with the dream. So it shows that they didn't erase his memories or thoughts or anything completely. They didn't completely erase his memories.
That was a great scene, too.
And I think the point of that, though, goes back to pointing the finger or playing the enemy role and being the business. It not being his lack of self. It's literally them taking away his freedom and his free will. It's continuously imposed on him versus him forgetting or him not knowing or him struggling with being a robot and being, it's all, the blame is put on the company and their control, whether it's lowering and raising his dopamine levels or triggering his brain differently to activate his subconscious. They were really taking that weight off his shoulders. And I think that it makes a different point. And it does put this blame on the corporation aspect, the government aspect, and it makes him more of a hero, because then he can continue to be himself through it and push through and get that. He always has that moral center. It's like he never loses it himself.
Yeah. And that's a main difference too. The original RoboCop was about finding one's identity after something very tragic. And in the original RoboCop, they make no bones about it. Alex Murphy dies. He dies very violently,
Deceased.
and you hear flatline, and he's dead. He's brought back, and it's about with a memory wipe, and he's having these issues. It's about, and we
taking
talked
part
about
of his arms. And
right.
all that.
Oh yeah, and
Literally
that's another
ripping
thing.
his body apart.
It's like take off his arm. Like we own him. Like he was product, and
he's not human anymore.
He's not human anymore. He's OCP's product. We're gonna build him up. We'll do whatever we want with him. And it was about Alex Murphy finding his identity, and we talked about that. Where this one is more about how to cope after a tragic, violent incident happens, and how to cope with your new identity that you're given. And it's a different tact, which I didn't mind. But
it's a total different footing, because being that he never died, you always feel like he deserves to be treated as a human. You feel like he is not property because he's always been alive. If you take that life away and you make it a rebirth, then it does become more justifiable that they are just a product, because they wouldn't be here without you. He, in this movie, in RoboCop 2014, he never fully died. They're just trying to own someone who's still a person. And that's so disturbing, and for me, that was one of the most, I guess, fierce reactions I had to this movie, is throughout being like, you can't just turn a person off, because he's still a human, he's still he still had his mind and all this, and so that to me was such a hard-hitting point that I felt they did really well.
Yeah, no, they did a great job, but the other great thing that they did too, in the original RoboCop, our human tether, our human anchor was Lewis, played by Nancy Allen.
Yeah.
And a female cop, which it would have been nice to have a female cop, but they had his wife in this one.
That's exciting.
But the human tether in this movie was more the Gary Oldman doctor. He was the one that, he was, he wanted Murphy. He felt that the human element was important to making this work out. More, that's why his sparring with the Jackie Earle Haley character, the Kelly Leak guy. So, he was the one thing that the tether of humanity that kept on fighting for his humanity.
See, to me, that's interesting, though, because while I do agree that he was the tether, I feel like he did at some points have an arc, which to me was interesting. I was very glad that he wasn't the full time through just, I'm the doctor who wants to be good to people. I'm the doctor who wants to, like, because you start with this very, I guess, moral doctor, and you see that beautiful scene of the guy with the new hands playing the guitar, and then at the end, obviously, he reacts and saves him. But in the middle, you see him battling with the wanting money and the having his reputation on the line and making sacrifices. And I liked that his character, although a tether and although a minor character, had a nice arc where you saw that he was going through struggles as well,
right,
and wasn't just like, oh, this is all bad the whole time.
Yeah, no, that doctor had to straddle a line, and his moral compass was in check throughout the entire thing.
Absolutely.
You know, especially when he is going to go, when RoboCop was going to go out for the first time and be introduced to the public, and he has a, you know, they've uploaded so much information that he couldn't handle it.
Which that bothered me. I'm like, why would you do something as serious as that in front of a humongous public audience?
Right.
That's very important. They're gonna see your product for the first time.
Right.
Why would you do something like this when it was already good to begin with?
Yeah, and
then mess with it.
Yeah, and he didn't. And Gary Oldman's character didn't want he didn't want RoboCop or Murphy. He didn't want Murphy to go out there. Like, he even said, he goes, "What am I supposed to do with this?" He goes, "We can't do this." And, you know, he came up with his way of doing it, but at the same time, he wasn't happy with what he was doing. It was an ends to the means for this problem, to this situation. But again, his moral compass was like his humanity was going to pop through.
Although, if he had been truthful, or I guess had that arc the whole way through, then he would have recognized his mistake and changed it right after the press conference, which to me was interesting. That I understood that it was a quick solution to make him unemotional and like get him through that moment. Yeah. But I was very surprised that after, they didn't take him back in and raise it back up.
Yeah,
they left it the same.
Yeah,
that to me was a little strange. I guess I understood it because they kind of needed him to be that way for a longer amount of time, just to keep the movie going. But I kind of wanted a rationalization from the CEO being like, no, keep him this way because this is how the public likes him. You can't change him back, or something. I expected some reaction, and maybe they cut it out. Maybe it was just a choice they couldn't have. But
I just looked at it as he comes out with the dopamine. He loses, let's say, a good chunk of his humanity, but he makes the big save of the day by capturing the murderer. It was all done on live TV. OmniCorp stock goes up. Michael Keaton's character is not, Sellers is not going to he doesn't want him to go back.
Yeah, I just wish that, I figured that's what was happening. I just wish that we'd had a glimmer of that, being that there were so many scenes in this movie that they were giving you information that didn't turn out to be much. And then when I really wanted information like I wanted them to tell me, oh, you can't bring him back to normal because that was my issue.
Okay.
And I felt that was part of the industry, the corporation behind it all, because just to show how corrupt they were. Right. They'd do anything to please the public because the public wanted RoboCop out there and helping society in that way. So I saw the corruption aspect of the OmniCorp behind that.
Yes.
But I liked how yes, we wanted them to change RoboCop back and raise his dopamines again, but I liked how they kept it going because overall we saw him overriding that, and because he himself naturally raises the dopamine levels back to normal.
And for a hero's struggle, it just makes it more poignant for that, to happen, if we want to call this poignant. But it's just for the hero's struggle to overcome
that
and
obstacle.
The doctor, it's that hurdle.
And one that can't be explained, that he has to mentally do, and whether it's an aspect of a soul or a heart that can overcome technology.
And again, finding his place back in that world, like how does he fit in? And those are the themes that I liked. What they tried to explore. The corporate greed. A lot of that went out the window. Outside of the original RoboCop, again, they for lack of better words, they really declawed a lot of the satire and corporate politics that was so overblown up in the original. That's a good or a bad thing. I mean, I just think that, number one, this is PG-13. If they're trying to get a younger audience in it, they just might not. I mean, I hate to say the words dumb it down, but that's what they seem to do. But they try to fill it up with other stuff.
Yeah, I think it was that in the first one, it was so clear there was corruption. We saw the bad meetings behind it all, like everything that they're planning on doing, all the bad things. And then in this one, because we didn't get those direct messages, they had to do it in different, more subtle ways, showing the corruption underneath, like making those decisions.
To me, the corruption was ringing straight through. It didn't even seem subtle in my eyes.
Yeah, it just wasn't.
You can tell something was going on.
Yeah, and OmniCorp was, in the original, OmniCorp ran the police, like they bought the police force.
Yeah.
There was talk about strike. Yeah, they took over the police force. They were going to run it their way.
Just taking this as a movie for itself, not because they did do a whole different storyline on the RoboCop. Like, to me, it was very apparent that OmniCorp was corrupt almost from the very beginning. Just how they like twist the image and control over the media and whatnot. So to me, that was just so obvious that I would never say. I thought it was a huge theme that there was corruption in both, like, the political aspects, the corporation aspects, the greed, the pride, everything. I felt that really rang through.
Yeah, again, for me, it was like Michael Keaton's character was seemingly like, look, he wanted to put, like, they wanted OmniCorp to work, and this was it for them. Like, if it didn't work, they I think they had made mention that OmniCorp would have gone away, that really would have hurt. And Michael Keaton's character is Sellers, which, you know, think of that last name and Sellers. So he was selling an image and whatnot, but it wasn't towards like, okay, how can I like fix this? And the corruptness, like, I don't think that there was corruptness, like they didn't have like the cops corruption, like they didn't know what the hell was going on with the cops. They weren't buying the cops, so to speak. Their corruptness came, you know, there was like greed and the marketing, and the marketing part, and you know, they were trying, like, I do almost believe that Michael Keaton or Sellers and beyond, they were trying to come up with a solution to say, hey, we can make this a safer place. The U.S. Senate said no, we need humans in there, and so I sort of kind of like that battle, and they said, well, let's put a human into a machine. Yeah. And see how that works out. But then there was the manipulation of the humanity in the machine.
And also, I think the manipulation of the public voice. We had Novak, who was swaying both ways throughout the whole movie. And I liked how Samuel L. Jackson's character, he asked all the public questions that we were thinking of. He voiced the audience. Right. And I thought he stole every scene, because we started the movie with him, and then we ended the movie with him. Like, we had those bookends, but he asked all the questions that we thought of, and like what makes it right, what makes it, you know, the cross the line between humanity and then politics that were involved in all that. Yeah,
no, you know, those are the interesting, because those are the type of shows that are sort of popular today. Those kind of loud people who talk and spout their views, and you know, whether it's radio or television or whatnot. So I got that. In a sense, they were almost like the commercials, like they were almost like, this is Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, where he shows up. And, you know, I found that was very interesting, you know, how they utilized that character and Novak's character. Yeah, you know, but they did let go of, you know, the bad guys in the original RoboCop were far nastier. Oh, yeah. They were bad people. And, you know, this one, you had the police corruption people, but I didn't get a sense that I knew, like in the original RoboCop, Kurtwood Smith's character, he's a bad man. Yes. And Ronnie Cox as the, you know, he's the second in command at OCP. He's pretty corrupt. It's, you know, he's corrupt. He's in cahoots with the main guy who's going to be selling drugs and running off, you know, New Detroit. Right. There was none of that. I thought, like, you know, we didn't know who the villain was. Like, the criminal in this wasn't as big.
That is true. Agreed. I agree that the person, but to me that was kind of like a point, that they wanted all the focus to be on these drug lords and these murders and whatnot, but you really saw that the heart of the corruption was in the corporation as well, and that was almost like a bigger demon. I liked that they kind of added all the different facets though, and added all these layers, because it gave you lots of stuff to focus on, and just kind of bounce around and give you different action scenes and whatnot. It didn't bother me though that it wasn't all about a cop going after one specific drug lord the whole time. It came in and it was a tool to his like humanity and him finding himself.
And it also showed there was some corruption in the police force too, because there were 2 cops involved in that. And so the thing that kind of bothered me a little bit, it was this, yes, because the original movie like focused throughout his whole mission was to get the people who murdered him, and then in this one was, yes, he figured it out who killed him, but then there was a huge shootout and that was it. That was done.
Yeah.
Done. Move on.
Yeah.
But how fast they tied that up was a big surprise to me, because that was like done in the middle of the movie, and I'm like, what else is there left?
Yeah, and I think, well, yeah, I mean, to show that, again, going back to OmniCorp, because again, I was like, I couldn't understand why Jackie Earle Haley's character shut him down. Like, there was no, like, he caught the 2 cops. RoboCop rationalizes who it had to come from, and it was his boss, it was his sergeant or captain. And when he went to go confront the captain and she started confessing, like, I don't think I got the sense that he was going to kill her unless RoboCop or Alex Murphy felt it was going to be a threat against him. Yeah. I think he might have tased her.
Heightened fear.
Heightened fear, right. But there was nothing, and then he gets shut down. So, and I think that was just to show that there was that was the kryptonite that, again, there was the kryptonite and the red bracelets, which is basically code
safe.
4. Yeah, that basically was that code that was programmed in the original RoboCop, saying you can't arrest an OmniCorp. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, you're not going to harm it. So how do you overcome this? So it was all to set that up and then fall into the corruption of OmniCorp and what they're going to do by shutting him down completely.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting how they had that control over him, because throughout the whole movie we know that he is human in a suit. Because in the original movie I thought he was more of a suit with a man inside, and then this one is a man who's wearing a suit. Like there's more humanity to this guy.
Absolutely.
But
and
the
he
fact
had an
that
arm.
they can still turn him off like a light switch kind of bothered me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. His face wasn't as deformed. He still had a hand. He still had,
He still had human lungs and his brain, even though it was tampered with a lot.
Yeah, but I want to talk about, like, those are some of the scenes that I thought were really cool. Like, it was like, okay, I did miss like like when they first turn on RoboCop in the original and they're trying to get his video to focus and stuff like that. I missed some sort of that, but I did like how he was sort of where they took apart his pieces.
I felt like I was watching Iron Man.
Yeah, it was almost like that, or the Borg Queen, like he was just coming apart and you saw his lungs. And...
Yeah, but I love the symbolism, why they chose those specific organs to still be living. It's like your face, your lungs, the core organs that help you live as a person.
Right.
How they
your
showed
heart.
that. Yeah, and the heart. Brain. The really the big main organs that you need to live. And I loved how they kept that going to remind us that he is still living, he is still a human.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I found it ironic that Jackie Earle Haley's character kept on calling him Tin Man. Maddox kept on calling him Tin Man, because I was like, the irony of that is that Tin Man had a heart, and he was trying to use it in a derogatory way, saying he's just a piece of tin. But we all know who watched The Wizard of Oz. We talked about it here. He was the character that had a heart,
had the biggest heart, despite
of course, despite his appearance. And Murphy, I thought, again, when we're talking about it, yes, Murphy, main difference is he knew who he was. He was very self-aware. He was still Murphy.
He had his memory. He knew his family.
They take that away from him. He's got to cope, and then they take that away, and then it's how do I come back? And how do I come back as the person that had a heart, that had a conscience? So those are the aspects that I'm like, wow, this is completely different from the original. I commend them for trying on that. I really do. I thought that was fun.
And I think another, because José Padilha, the director, he mentioned in an interview that that he took the concepts from the original RoboCop and modernized it. So not a complete remake, but just the same ideas and storyline, and made it more applicable to now modern day society.
Well, he even talked about how he really thinks that this could very much be reality in the near future, and that robots really are becoming present. He used this is really what he sees happening. Like he was like, I could totally envision us first using robots in other countries and then bringing them home. And he's like, he felt this was more relevant and that people are going to have to be facing this issue, so why not explore the topic? And he commended the original RoboCop for realizing that so far ahead of its time, and when it really was kind of out of sight. So I thought that was interesting, and an interesting perspective that he was trying to, in this, what we call science fiction, he really is seeing a future reality.
Yeah, because I loved how we started the movie off in Tehran.
Right.
We're in warfare and we're using this, and from our perspective, that it looks like it's effective over in that country. So if it's working for us there, why would it not work for us here in America? So I can see why they wanted this project to be launched in the U.S.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. I found this article about the writer on Screenwriter Review, and Zetmer was basically, how do you take a beloved cult film and give it to today's, and make today's audience want to see it? And he said, hey, there's a lot of things you love from the original, but this one's a completely different tone, which we started talking about. Why did MGM decide to go with a more modern tone? And he basically says it's budget. He goes, the original budget we talked is about $13 million, and this one was estimated at about $100. It's about all in, it's about $150 million. Yeah. And when you're dumping that, and he's basically saying, look, when you're dumping $100 plus million, we got to go PG-13. We get the studio again.
Got to get more money out.
The studio's OmniCorp. They're OCP. They want to try to get as much money out of this as they possibly can. And so he had to curb the violence. He had to make it different violence. And, and it's about a robot. It's for kids. And so they did try to make it for a younger audience. And hence, I think that's why all of that satire and the religious references, the first one's a very hard R. Even by today's standard, it's a hard R movie. You take that stuff out because teenagers, they don't give a crap.
And if you think about it, there wasn't really a lot of killing in this movie. Yes, we get the suicide bombers in the beginning, but that was necessary. We had to take them out. And then
we have the drug lord.
Yeah, and the drug lords too, who was also. But throughout, we had the action scenes with the simulations going on. We had you're knocking them, shooting them down, but you're not really killing them. That was a test. It wasn't a person against another person killing each other out of pure murder.
Right.
And by the way, just because you mentioned it, the first initial test run of him in his suit once his conscience has been altered was my favorite fight scene of the movie. When he tasers Mark at the very end, and he's going through and he literally has all of his targets and he's just going straight down the warehouse. That was probably my favorite fight scene of the movie, which is
that was the second one.
Was it the second one?
The first one was when RoboCop was up against the other drone, I believe.
Right.
RoboCop,
and
then they're in the small.
Yeah. So the test to get home, I guess would be what it would be called. That was my favorite fight scene of the movie.
Yeah, no, it's
but that wasn't really violence though. That was a test, and it just showed his abilities, but it wasn't a person against another person killing.
It reminds me of Catching Fire. When we watched Katniss in her simulation, the most recent one, it's one of the best fight scenes in the thing, and it's not real. But
it's interesting too because I did find an article. It was in the Atlantic, and it basically says the RoboCop rule: when remakes have more killings but less gore. It was like lots of films today. The recent update of the 1987 original trades submersive carnage for sanitized violence that asks fewer moral questions. And, it is interesting because even in the Total Recall remake, which was also PG-13, based off of it's a remake of a very, hard R science fiction movie, again, directed by Paul Verhoeven. Mm-hmm. There was a lot more gunfire going on in this RoboCop, whether it's tasering, whatever,
absolutely,
than there was, say, in the original RoboCop. But in the original RoboCop, the gunfire, like, every bullet hit.
And everyone died.
Everybody dies.
Well, just having, in this movie, having him taser everyone was very interesting to me. I mean...
Yeah, it goes to show that he didn't really kill people like they did in the first one, where it was ruthlessly killed, mercilessly.
Yeah.
Just done.
Yeah, it's it's just interesting, and there was about a month ago there was another article saying how PG-13 movies, the violence has really been pushing the envelope to where there are some rated R movies that aren't as violent as PG-13 movies. So I don't know if upcoming there's going to be a review of like rating practices and the ratings boards, but it's just very interesting that there are articles out there that are making the comparison between 1987 and 2014, and even though there's less bloodshed, there were more bullets flying.
But there's more humanity in this movie too, with the taser, because taser's supposed to knock someone down but not kill them. They're supposed to not kill them,
right?
But most of the time. But and I loved how the purpose of the simulation test showed the RoboCop's thought process, because with the drones you only get that two-step process. There's no humanity, there's no conscience underneath it all, and
there's no questioning.
Yeah, there's no questioning. And then with Murphy's, you saw the five-step process, like his whole reasoning and his action, the reasons behind his actions.
I must say that one scene where they pointed out that topic and it was brought to the CEO of OmniCorp, and they kind of showed him both screens at the same time, and he's going, "No, I fixed it," when he's really has given him the product that I think
he
that
asked for.
that he asked, and that the country or the audience wants. Like, you're visibly seeing, but that's what makes someone human, is that extra step. That was the whole purpose of this mission, and you're not getting it. To me, that was like such a great scene.
Yeah,
you
I
like
agree.
That was the product that America wanted, and he he just didn't like it because it wasn't as controllable, it wasn't as precise, and I was just like,
he was persuaded by Maddox for whatever reason. Maddox, I mean, it turned into a ski race. I mean, basically is what it came down to. Well, he took him out faster this way. He's like 5 seconds behind, and to me, I was like, well, what does that even matter?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's 5.
Yeah,
5
it
seconds.
shouldn't. Yeah, it's 5. Like, it doesn't. The same results. He got the very same result by being who he was. Had they had it so that somebody got injured, like the kid got injured because of his hesitation, perhaps, maybe, but he got the same results. He got the bad guys the way he was supposed to, and he combined his elements of being a machine and human thought. So what? He was 5 seconds behind, but Maddox was in one way, shape, or form. He was against the project, and he goes, "See, mine to take that out," and
Mine's better.
Persuading sellers to go, "Yeah, it's much better because he's got a." Being human is not what we really want, is it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
We need, because I guess in those situations out in the field, that you need that to be precise and fast, and you don't have time to really think things through. You got to act before you think.
Yeah.
And I can see why they straddled that moral line.
And then we got into the big test, the big fight scene.
Yes, where after he's been altered unknowingly.
Yeah, and you had the great music going on.
Yeah, and then they had, it seemed vague to me, I'm not sure about you guys, but throughout that simulation, the second simulation, they're explaining the program and what he's doing his own actions, but it's the program that's actually doing it, but he's thinking that he's doing it.
He believes that he's having free will. As soon as the way that I took it, as soon as the visor came down, the machine took over. like electronics took over. When the visor comes up, he was like human.
He's
and
human.
yeah,
That's exactly what I thought. So for me, I thought about 3/4 of the way through, it was going to be like he was going to take the visor off in the middle of a battle, and then he was going to be able to like rationalize clearly. That didn't happen, but that was my understanding of the programming as well.
But then,
Okay. Then he lifts the visor at the end and still tasers.
Well, but again, the guy was a dick.
Yeah,
so
he
of
was.
course he goes, "You want to know?"
was.
And then the doctor says, "Go ahead." And but then don't forget, because it was shortly. Well, then we're going into RoboCop is going to be shown to the world, and that's when they do the dopamine. That's when they really took away his emotions, his humanity. They took out his emotion chip, so to speak. So that second iteration, he was altered yet one more time. So his visor coming off wasn't so much going to be an issue. And again, talking about the violence, I mean, there was violence against RoboCop a lot. The final fight scene when they're trying to take him down, I mean, he was getting shot up pretty bad, and he had the two Ed 209s to contend with, and he even had to 127 hours himself and get out of that, like that, And so that to me was sort of a nod to the first one, where he loses his arm and he gets up and he loses part of his helmet and you see his eye. And so, I mean, I thought those scenes were pretty cool. I thought, but again, going back to the original, the main difference is the cops were told, like, take him down. Like, OCP wanted that thing shut off because they had other plans. And, he was the bastard stepchild, so to speak.
And going back to the whole ripping of his arm off, it wasn't as effective in the reboot that I thought that it was in the first one. Because the first one, we know he is human, but he's trying to have that self-awareness and realize that he's human. And this one, we already know he's human. Right. So it's just like, yeah, all right, get rid of the robotic parts of him.
Right. And this wasn't a resurrection movie either. It wasn't. He was coping with having his mechanics. I mean, again, we're talking two different themes. And again, I had wished, like I said, that in RoboCop 2 is such a horribly mean-streaked movie. I had wished that these were I go, God, this would have made RoboCop, this would have made a good sequel to the original RoboCop, like, because they sort of kind of go a different way. He's exploring different morality. He knows who he is. Isn't it, like, for science fiction, now that he has become self-aware, now isn't it great to figure out how he fits into the world? And that's what this one was about. And I was like, this is the story that we should have gotten from RoboCop to the sequel, and they would have had a much better franchise. So now they just start off with it, and we'll see what happens.
Give it a very clean ending, so if there is this franchise to this one, it'll be interesting where they start out.
Yeah, it would be.
Because this movie, I mean, I feel like this concept is very attuned to being a franchise or a series. It just is, because you've given someone unlimited capabilities. I mean, cop shows, think about how long they run.
Forever.
But with this, like, it was such a clean cut at the end that I was very surprised. Everything got wound up. And for a movie that had so many layers, a guy struggling with a robot, a guy struggling with his family, political, company, cops, drug lords, city, like, there was so much, and everything ended so clean.
Yeah.
I was very surprised.
This one, because of your thoughts, this one was like an origin story to a superhero. Like, they're setting this up, and at the end, our origin story has been completed. We know how RoboCop has become RoboCop. Where at the end of the first one, like, it was very, again, it was very, what's your name, son?
Yeah.
And he goes, Murphy. And that's where it ends. And you can see more story. Now, if they continue to make more, which they might. I mean, I think this is something interesting.
Yeah, I think that's the purpose of this movie. They left it, they tied up everything, but they left it kind of open-ended that they could have more to keep the franchise
Make
going.
other villains and such. But I think this is interesting because this 2014 version came out on February 12th. The Sony put it out. The production budget was around 100. The total budget, prints, advertising, and production is about 150. So they spent estimated around $50 million for this. Its opening weekend, it did $21.6 million, which is okay. The total date right now, or the total gross to date is, it's about 35 million. It's going to be really funny because domestically it could end up crawling to what RoboCop, the original did, at around 55. But catch this, the combined foreign and domestic gross is $103 million. So you do the math. It's done over $70 million overseas.
In 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, it was released a little bit earlier overseas.
Yeah.
But it's been doing gangbusters overseas, and studios notice things like that. Hence, they will make a robot. Like, it does so well overseas, it could potentially make a sequel. Yeah. Not so much because they know it'll do great here, but because of the potential it'll do overseas. So it's just interesting that it's done that much more, or that much better.
Yeah, and
I agree.
I think technically this movie was superb. I mean, there wasn't really a lot of. I mean, there was a lot of special effects, but nothing that really bothered me because it wasn't that unbelievable. I mean, with the original, we had the graphics of the computer graphics, the screen, and the personal video recording and whatnot. Right. We got those elements, and we got a little bit of those elements in this movie. We saw the archive footage of his own murder, his own crime scene, and like I thought that the editing part of that was so smooth. We saw different camera angles, and just how they executed that visually was superb.
Yeah, one of my favorite scenes, we hinted upon it, is when he was being awoken, he was having the memory of Fly Me to the Moon. And that scene, to me, I was like, wow, that was done really well. Like, having
it slowly
black.
Disappear.
Yeah, but the whole thing's too, it started off with black, complete black, and then when it came up, he was on his patio, they were having a barbecue, and the camera's going around, his wife comes, they're dancing, and then slowly it starts to go away, and the only thing that's left up is Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, and just him standing
and him
there.
sitting there, yeah. And I was like, wow, it looked great. It looked really good. I like that introduction. I like that introduction to how we see RoboCop for the first time.
Yeah, and I liked how they introduced us with this new RoboCop, with his memories, because it shows that he still has that part of him with him. Right. So, and I thought the visual effects of the archives, especially when he's getting uploaded with all the crime photos and whatnot, and then how he's scanning everybody, and then just like how they showed that visually was pretty cool.
Yeah,
I agree. I shot well. I felt like they captured mechanics very well. I felt like the machines were well done. I felt like his armor was well done, down to like the details. I'm mentioning it again, where they were showing the man's hands as he played guitar. I thought that was just excellently shot, and I thought it felt so realistic. And I was just like, wow, people are coming so far in digital technology.
Yeah.
And also, I felt like they captured speed very well in this film.
Yeah.
I think so too. And Demetri, you actually have some information about the suit.
Yeah, they were talking about. I found this article. Fast Company co-design, and they were interviewing the production designer who did this, and he was basically saying, like, how do you stay faithful to a classic and the much beloved costume, which, let's face it, that costume's pretty cool, that Peter Weller gets to wear, as clunky and as difficult as it was for him to maneuver in. Yeah. He goes, when you're doing this, he goes, what technology is capable of being completely changed? And so they did. I mean, Rob Bottin's original thing for, like, when they were designing the suit, and he was the original designer of it. He wanted it to be sleek, and it should be, because it's the future and it should be sleek. And they were able to get what they got, but it was a little bit clunkier. So they really pared it down so much that it was sleeker. And how they make reference to the original movie only has one suit. There's only one, and there were like three. There end up being three. There's the one that pays homage to the original. Then there's his black suit, which is more like a stealth mode kind of a suit. And then there's the one at the end, which is sort of a combination of original and new, So yeah, and this is a guy too, Martin Wist, a production designer. This guy's worked with he's worked with J.J. Abrams, he's worked with Joss Whedon. He has a good science fiction background to do this. And I actually thought the suit was sort of cool.
I thought the suit was fantastic. It was very reminiscent to me of Iron Man. I would like to put them next to each other and like really look at the details.
Yeah, the visors, very similar.
And just like the structure of it, they are both very, I guess, in a way, streamlined and powerful looking suits. But I loved the suit. I actually prefer black, so I felt like that was the one good decision that OmniCorp made on a design scale. Looked good.
I like the original, and I like the black was. I understand the black, sleeker, made for today's world, and it's more stealth, I guess.
Yeah.
But I liked how the visor could slip down. Especially if somebody drew a weapon on him, he just went into total combat mode. So he was slicker and faster, and but I thought they did a good job.
I liked the black, and I loved the sound effects that went with it.
Yes.
Because in the original we get the loud clinking when every time he walked, and we got it again in this movie, which they kept that sound effect throughout. I mean, we can understand it's a heavy iron suit,
right?
And the sound effects to it, like all the tasers and the gunfire,
Sure.
Everything that just added more to how crazy the suit was.
Yeah, it was.
Nice.
Yeah, and I like the sound effects too, and they sort of kind of paid homage. Although, however, again, I just felt the final big gunfight scene with the ED-209s, and just going back to reminiscing about the $6 Million Man, Steve Austin, a man barely alive. Again, this is about bionics.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, too, because just quickly, $6 Million Man, Steve Austin had to cope with being part man, part machine. And first season, he was dealing with that, much like Alex Murphy is dealing with it here. But I could have swore I heard the famous no as he was fighting, and I'm like going, are they doing that on purpose? Are they just messing with me here, or am I just imagining this? It was just I would love to know.
You're gonna have to wait to know on DVD.
Yeah, I would love to know if that was done on purpose.
I felt there was a lot of homages to the original movie in this one, and some lines that I wouldn't buy that for $1.
I wouldn't buy that for $1.
Wouldn't buy that for $1 in this movie, and then the original had that it wouldn't cost you $1 or something like that, right?
The original was I'd buy that for $1, and he said I wouldn't buy that for $1.
Yeah, or it won't cost you.
And then they had the line, you're move creep, or dead or alive, you're coming with me. Mm-hmm. Look, the gentleman that plays RoboCop in this movie,
Joel Kinnaman.
I liked him, but he's no Peter Weller to me. Peter Weller was still like I was having a hard time getting Peter Weller, like, he had the lips, he had the, like, knew.
He had the physicality.
He had the physicality, and he played it. Kinnaman did a great job. I mean, all things considered, he had big shoes to fill, literally and figuratively.
And I'll say, I'm glad we're getting into the actors. Joel Kinnaman, I know him from the show The Killing, the AMC's The Killing. So, and his character in that show is very stoic and doesn't really show emotion and whatnot, and so I was kind of expecting that again in this movie, but they touched so much upon his humanity, and we did get some emotion from Murphy. Mm-hmm. He's crying in the beginning. He's worried about his family. So, but yes, it is a lot to live up to for filling the shoes of the original actor, but I thought he did a good job.
Yeah, me too.
And Gary Oldman's character was awesome.
I felt like a lot of the emotional weight or the, I don't know, I guess acting chops was put on the supporting characters, and I felt like that they really pulled through. And I think that needed to happen because half the time you had a zombie like RoboCop who was drugged out. So it really, the other characters had to carry it and be really committed, and I think they did, and I think you saw the way they thought and how they felt. I thought that his wife did a pretty good job. I feel like oftentimes I was watching her and I was like, I wonder how many lines she actually has in this movie, because oftentimes you're just watching her like deal with this and like having people either talk to her, making decisions, or it's just basically reaction shot after reaction shot after reaction shot.
Yeah.
Like, how many different ways can a girl cry in a way? But so I thought she did a very good job.
Yeah, Abby Cornish did well, I thought. And it was just interesting that, the original RoboCop, he's dead. And we learned that his family has moved on. This one, Clara Murphy, she's given the pen. It's like...
She's the driving force.
Yeah, it's like, this is your decision. Like, you've got to sign this for us. Like, we can save him or we can make him better, but it's all in your hands. So, and I think, the family aspect of this was built up much more in this version than it was in the original, but I didn't hate that. And I liked, because she had to deal with her decision as well as the character was being shown to people, like when he came home hugging the armor, she had to deal with her decision. Did I do the right thing?
Yeah. And the son also dealing with that as
right.
well.
I thought that was I thought it was actually sort of kind of a touching scene. I thought it was nice when he sees his son for the first time, and the son looks at him and he's like, "Hey, do you want to?" That was a weird line. Do you want to touch this? A man telling a little boy, "Hey, you want to touch this?" But then the son goes, "Hey, I TiVoed all of the Flyers games or the Red Wing games." He goes, "Do you want to watch?" And he was like, "Yeah, sometime." And that's when he started getting emotional. But that to me was the thing that they shared, is watching hockey. And
and
it was a nice scene.
Yeah,
I thought the son was a scene stealer throughout the entire film.
He was good.
I thought, and the good thing about having the family was what helped him bring him back to his human level when he's on the street fighting crime, but then he's looking up all these archives of his family. That brings him back to humanity. Yeah. So I thought that was good.
Brings him back to the house.
Yeah,
It doesn't bring him to his actual son, but it did bring him back to the house.
Yeah, and it shows that human quality in him. Amy Garcia, who played the female scientist, I had actually met her when she was like flying back and forth between filming RoboCop and the other projects she was doing, and she talked about this movie a bit and her character, that she's the female scientist who still has that moral center. Right. And she was also helped with the whole project of OmniCorp as well. And I thought she was great, and she was in this movie a lot more than I thought.
Yeah, I liked her too. I thought Amy Garcia was really good. And and again, I'm just you put Kelly Leak in a movie, and I'm referring to the Bad News Bears, the original. Jackie Earle Haley, to me, I grew up watching him, and he... I
loved his character. Yes, he was an ass. Yeah. But he was that antagonist that kept RoboCop going. Right. Like, why he kept fighting, why he was that clear person to know that RoboCop is the good one, and he's the asshole.
Yeah, yeah. So he's it was good to see him in the movie.
You're so thankful that he's not in the suit.
Yes.
Right. Oh, yes. Yeah.
You don't want a guy like him. No. You don't want Maddox in the suit.
He's what can be wrong with that whole project. I'm also gonna say, for me, it was good to see Michael Keaton in a movie and have like a meteor, like be in a movie for not for like 2 minutes or whatever. He was he had a good role, and it was good to see him again. He's had whatever his problems and demons that he had to face, but it was good to see him back on the big screen again. It would always be good to see him. I like that he's the one that says, "How about black?" Being that he was Batman, that they had his character saying, "Yeah, put him in black because that's good. That looks cool."
That's cool. Yeah. And then who else? Samuel L. Jackson, Novak, the loud guy. But he was fun. Again, I said I think he stole all the scenes that he was in. Mm-hmm.
I think given his material, it was kind of hard not to, in a way, steal the scenes. Like, he was prepped to be the center of attention and to be the breaking the fourth wall. Like, I don't know how you could have, I guess, missed how they could have overlooked. He's a big personality and it was a big role, so it to me it fit. It's funny because I will leave this movie thinking about him. He is definitely a standout. One of my favorite moments was when he just shut down.
Yeah.
It's okay. That's enough time. Yeah, that was funny.
That was
good.
hilarious. Because it wasn't even. He just felt like it wasn't even meant to be funny. It was just like,
Right.
okay, now we're gonna keep going.
Yeah.
So I thought
Close out the Senate.
Yeah, no, and again, we talked a little bit about Gary Oldman, and I really think that, again, to me, Oldman's performance. Hey, I'd read something today that he admitted to doing it for the money. Regardless, he didn't phone in. If he just did the movie for the money, he didn't phone it in. I mean, there are plenty of actors who do a role for the money who'll just phone it in, and he didn't. He actually led. He was credible, and he added the human element to it. I'm going to go back to the guitar playing scene because I think it was that scene that really sets up thematically what the rest of the movie is going to talk about, because you had that great scene, and by the way, is the person playing the guitar, he is an actual classical guitarist. Who let me see, I had this article. He's a conservatory guitar teacher who played this, and he was playing a piece from Rodrigo, and I love the scene where it says his he was like, you're happy that he was able to play, but once he started getting emotional about it, he couldn't do it, and he was like saying, but I need my emotions to play. And you knew in one way, shape, or form that one line, which people can consider a throwaway line, was going to come into play with our hero. Now, the actual teacher was like saying stuff. He goes, he goes on. He goes, making mistakes was easy. He confesses, every time I'm emotional, I screw up. So he's admitting that, with how he plays guitar and things like that. But for him, the big deal was he got to act opposite Gary Oldman, and he was like he's one of his biggest all-time favorite actors, and he was fantastic, and he talked to me about music, and I think that scene, outside of like the special effects, which were fantastic,
Yes,
it was a wonderful scene.
It sets up what's going to happen, and again, not a scene that was in the original RoboCop.
Yeah,
so it's something new.
For me, it was interesting, though, that there were these little scenes throughout this movie, the one we just mentioned included, that told the audience who was watching kind of this other theme. But it was interesting that they didn't also present those elements to the public within the world. So that scene, for one, because it's telling the audience a general theme. Also, the audience gets to see how the robot in the very beginning shoots the kid with the knife.
Right.
And like that, to me, was very much like, this is the horror that people could face. This is the threat. This is what people are worried about.
Yeah.
And we got to see that, and we got to see the guitar scene. But the news didn't actually show those things. And that was very interesting to me, and I think it was because it would have given the opposition such a vote that so much of like the RoboCop existence would have been shut down. But it was interesting that they gave us that information.
Right.
That they let us see that and gave us, I guess, a bigger window or a bigger view of this world. Part of me wishes that the world could have seen it, but then you wouldn't have gotten the movie. But at least they gave, like, I was like, oh, well, at least I know what's going on.
And you do get your glimpse too at the at Norton Dennett's character, because he was truly like, come on, no, go ahead, give it a try. He goes, just how do you play guitar? Give it a try. And you could see that he really, his incentive was to make people's lives better by technology, and this is why we talked about it in RoboCop, and we'll talk about it here. Like, there have been so many movies about the blending of technology and humanity, and how it can work, how it can go sourly rotten.
Poor.
And Her was a recent movie, which actually, I said it deals with these themes a lot, and that's what science fiction can do. Outside of like a drama, and that's probably why we're not seeing remakes of like Kramer versus Kramer or Philadelphia.
Great movie. If they remade Kramer versus Kramer, I'd be really upset.
But it just seems that science fiction and horror can either be like rebooted or redone in a sense, where you're not going to remake Fast Times at Ridgemont High or 16 Candles.
Well, and if you think about it, like
they've talked about redoing Gone with the Wind like 80 times.
Yeah.
Please don't. But the thing is, like, science fiction, because of technology has evolved so much.
Sure.
And science fiction movies tend to have technology in it because they want to modernize it. And, like, technology is better now, so why not make the technology back then better now? So I can understand that why a lot of the reboots are science fiction types.
Or horror,
instead
but,
of drama.
But I don't want to see a Jaws remake. The technology was the technology in 74, 75 was one of the reasons why Jaws is as iconic as it is. It's not because the shark looks fake. It's because the technology didn't work that Spielberg had to think out of the box to make a suspenseful movie. Now today with technology, it's like seeing less of the shark in the original Jaws adds for more tension, where today we would see more of the shark and it wouldn't be as impactful.
No.
So...
Because we know it'd be fake.
Well, yeah.
More fake.
And it just wouldn't,
It wouldn't hit as hard as it did the first time.
Yeah. And look, George Lucas didn't remake Star Wars. He just re-released them. And, he added some special effects. Okay, it was fine the first time, but, those movies have had more facelifts than Joan Rivers. You gotta stop. Like, you gotta, the originals stand on their own, and yes, there's, and J.J. Abrams is at the helm. So I'm just going on the fact of like remaking. Yeah,
I'll go on board.
It's just a tough call. Just my idea, if you're going to remake, if you're an executive and you're watching this, listening to this, you don't pick movies that most everybody is aware of. Do what Lionsgate did. You pick My Bloody Valentine. You pick A Night of the Comet. You pick A Night of the Creeps, or something that, had a very small cult following that you could make for today's audience, and they might like another view of this kind of a horror movie. I mean, stop with Invasion of the Body Snatchers, because that movie's been made like 12 times, but we don't need to see Psycho. Just make something that was pretty good back in the day.
They're doing prequel to Psycho, the Bates Motel.
Well, Bates Motel, great show.
Great show.
Love the show, and what they're doing is great, and they're going in this great avenue. But it's not a
remake. But they're going back to the franchise and adding more to it.
Yeah,
they're expanding.
They're expanding.
Yes.
So let's not stop remaking movies that were just. If you're going to have to remake, and I get it, because it's property that's already there, it's easy. It's basically, that's what it comes down to. Actually, it was Phil who, when we were talking about RoboCop, he said it perfectly. He goes, money. And that's what, trying to reboot a RoboCop franchise. And if you're trying to get kids to come in, that means you can sell more toys. You can have, more movies and maybe spin off a television series again. Who knows? I just say, stop. Just dig deeper into the movie archives and find a smaller movie that people might not know about and give it to them.
Yeah, take flops and then make them better.
Hey, that's not a bad idea either,
Like movies that originally failed and then redo it and make it better.
Although I'm not sure I'd want to see Heaven's Gate being remade, but I see where you're going with. But yeah.
It's a different strategy. I think it's
well,
good
if
strategy.
you think about it, the whole Buffy franchise, the movie itself was a flop, but they had an iconic TV show afterwards.
Oh my God, yeah.
So, but like that possibility can work.
Absolutely.
But overall, I like this movie as a newer interpretation of RoboCop. Overall, as a movie, I thought it was very solid. The visual effects, the graphic, the storyline was very easy to follow. For today, modern day society, it was a fun movie to watch.
Yeah, I think so too. There was one other little tidbit that I found about Dr. Norton's first name is Dennett, which is the last name of a philosopher by the name of Daniel Dennett. He owes me money, who is famous for his work on consciousness and free will, both of which are key themes in this movie, which I like. So Daniel Dennett argues that consciousness is an illusion created by layers of physical and chemical processes, and that the consciousness is essentially computational. He nonetheless argues that his view is compatible with the idea of free will, which is very interesting about what this movie tends to be about. I just had to throw that in before we might start to wrap up, but yeah.
Yeah, and I thought the music to this movie was well done. They had the composer Pedro, I'm probably going to butcher his last name, Bronfman?
Yeah, Bronfman.
The music really added to the action and kind of felt like an ode to the 80s as well, music, but it was more instrumental and like, yes, building.
Yeah. It was a little bit more technology. To me, the Basil Polidorus, you know, dun, 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 and the clanking was much, I don't know. I'm glad they incorporated that. I just wanted more.
Yeah.
I know.
But I like the music.
So, overall thoughts, music?
Overall thoughts on music?
Oh, music, movie, and yeah.
I mean,
do you like music?
I feel like,
do you listen to music?
What is music?
She loves music.
Yeah. I actually, the most I remember is I think there's a moment, or I don't know if it's in the beginning or the end, where there's more of a dubstep quality to some of the soundtrack, and I was like, oh, what is this? I was expecting more of an 80s style soundtrack. I thought that was going to be more present. So I wasn't unpleasantly surprised. Like, this to me is very much kind of your typical
Sci-fi.
superhero
Of today, yeah.
Yes, it's very modern. It's very the big swells and instrumental, and you get the
The
orchestra
synth,
in the background, and then so it was interesting. There was a little of that like dubstep bass in certain parts of this film, and I was like, interesting. That was what really caught my notice. Overall, with the film, I think it was fun. I think digitally it was well done.
Shot on a red camera.
Yeah.
There you go, and like
shot on red.
I'd be interested. I think that they probably will end up making this into a franchise. I think it'll be interesting because they have shut down so many of the avenues. Like, they can really target, I guess, the foreign market if they wanted to, bringing in different countries. Because, as I said, they wrapped this one up cleanly, so that gives them a lot to play with. Because now they can go on any track they want, and they've established a character who, to me, was very. I guess I was seeing a lot of remnants of other films in this. I was like, oh. It's the suit from Iron Man, and he's reminding me of Captain America. I mean, so maybe I'm getting a little too overwhelmed with a lot of the superhero movies.
I don't disagree. I mean, it could have been a conscious decision to make them like, this is what kids can identify with more today, and this is what we can do. But so I don't disagree with that statement at all. Sure, make them a little bit more I don't know, recognizable, so to speak. So, you know, Iron Man's suit can come off that way. So, yeah.
But it was definitely fun.
Yeah, and personally for me, listen, I went in as a negative Nancy. I didn't think that the movie was I didn't think it was going to be good. In fact, I call it RoboFlop a couple of times now. You know, at the end of the day, I think when we first talked, it didn't suck. But that's an important thing. It didn't suck. And for you folks who are so diehards of the original, just go in with it a little bit of more of an open mind. You might end up liking it a little bit more than you think. Your expectations could be so low that you know, you'll come out going, "Hey, it wasn't that bad." I at least appreciated that it just wasn't a rehash of the original RoboCop, because that really would have sucked. Because that wouldn't have worked whatsoever. So kudos, you know, and José Padilha did a really good job. I'm very fascinated to see what his next project or projects would be. He has a good eye for action, and he moves the camera around in a very interesting, fascinating way.
Pace,
keeps
swirling,
you entertained.
You're always moving.
Yeah,
it's very quick, and he introduces you to that style very quickly in this film. From even the newsroom is moving quickly. So I was like, okay, you have to kind of hop on board. And
and he didn't have to rely on shaky cam to do it. He didn't the movie wasn't over edited.
There was a little shaky cam.
There was some shaky cam.
But it wasn't he didn't rely on that. And, you know, I thought he did a very capable job. I think for him, it's almost a lose-lose situation, because you are going to get the people who are going to go, what the hell are you doing? Why this movie? But I think he carries it off. I'm curious to see his future projects.
Yeah, he definitely was out there for a lot of battles with this film.
Yeah.
One, he's got a reboot. One, he's so much money. Two, there's so much influence by the studios.
Yeah.
And you're handling a half man, half robot. So dealing with all of that, I'm sure it's puts a lot of expectations and a lot of constrictions, which I know he mentioned. And to still pull through and like keep it fun, I thought was a really good job.
And he's a rated R director, and that was one of the battles. And you know, dealing with executives could be daunting. But it was his first movie here, I guess, coming into the States, and so yeah, he's got to take his lumps. But hey, I think he did a good job.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So fun movie, and I'm glad we did the reboot of RoboCop because we did the original. We actually got a nice review on iTunes.
That was sweet. That was great. We've actually been
5-star
doing good as a team. Listen, I sent the email around. We're one of the top ranked podcasts for movies and TV. We were like number 13, lucky 13. We're ahead of Ellen. We're ahead of some Game of Thrones podcasts. I mean, that's fantastic.
I love it.
Now you're right, and you're right. Thanks for sure. Yeah, iTunes. Check out the review on RoboCop, and then
thank you so much. That was
thank you very much.
Sweet.
And keep on watching, listening, keep writing us.
Yes.
Oh,
keep rating, keep commenting.
One other thing to perpetuate us is that I believe next week Gravity comes out on Blu-ray. Wow. If you haven't watched
still
it,
in theaters.
Yeah, I know, but they got that window, and so it's coming out. So hey, if you haven't watched Gravity yet, now's a good time. On demand it, get it on Blu-ray, watch it, then come back to Anatomy of Movie and check us out again. I mean, that's the thing about our show. We will live on forever, and with all the media that's out there, for you to watch a movie after it's been in the theaters. Let's not, and
talk about it.
Right, you can talk about it.
We do.
That's what we do.
All right, and so you can follow all of us on iTunes and YouTube, on Twitter at Movie Anatomy on Twitter, on iTunes Anatomy of a Movie, and you can follow us here for our next film, which we have yet to decide which one we're going to dissect, but it's going to be fun as always. Ha. Thank you guys for talking about RoboCop.
Thank you, folks.
The reboot. Thank you all for listening. We will see you next time.
Yes.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.
Thanks for watching Anatomy of a Movie on YouTube. For more on your favorite movies, subscribe to our channel here and be sure to let us know what you think in our comment section below here. Bye.